What up, brosif? I'm Leon, the Paperback Maniac, back yet again for another vintage paperback horror review. Well, sort of horror. Today, we are looking at Book 2 in the uber-violent Mutants Amok men's adventure series. This one is titled Mutant Hell and is written by Mark Grant, a pseudonym for the writer David Bischoff, and it was published by Avon Books in March of 1991. Now, if you haven't yet seen my video review of the first Mutants Amok book, I suggest you do that before watching this one. I will post a link in the description box below. Now I'll read the synopsis from the back cover of this one. Humanity in chains. Battered and enslaved, the human race cowers in the fearsome face of a horror they themselves created. Awesome mutant warriors bred in the high-tech laboratories of the future. Brutal and unstoppable, these genetically designed super soldiers rose up against their mortal masters, transforming the Earth into a gore-soaked mutant playground. Now, an attempted revolt by a brave but foolhardy band of Homo sapien guerrillas has been mercilessly crushed. Their captive leader, Max Turkel, is faced with a grim and terrible choice. Either slow, agonizing death at the hands of his inhuman enemies, or collaboration, which will consign every last man, woman, and child on the planet to the flames of an unspeakable mutant hell. Yes, so this book picks up where Book 1 left off, as the farmhand Jack Bender and his buddy Phil Potts are attempting to escape the mutant genetic testing facility with Max Turkel's plane and try to go save Max Turkel, who has been taken to Emperor Charlemagne, what's his name? Cyborg Emperor Ignatius Charlemagne VII, 0.5, in his underground mountain compound in Colorado. So the book starts in medias res, as Phil and Jack are in Max Turkel's plane trying to get it started as they are being approached by a gun-toting member of the mutant police known as a lawmaker. Or a lawkeeper, sorry. And these, no, it is a lawmaker. These lawmakers are quote-unquote virtual slabs of muscle, and they have these rippling, bulging six-packs in which they keep their, they holster their weapons in there, and they also stow their favorite beer of choice, Spudweiser. And this guy has a shield, and he's running toward the plane. Phil Potts, you know, is just the simple farm guy who got swept up in all this. He's trying to ward off this lawmaker with his Magnum 45, not doing a great job of it. Eventually, Jack Bender, our kind of new hero, who has been, you know, the last 2 weeks under the tutelage of Max Turkel, the actual leader of the human rebels, he takes, pauses from his duties, you know, with the plane, takes the gun from his buddy Phil, and starts shooting at the lawmaker. Eventually kind of hits the mark right above the mutant's shield. And here we are treated to our first of many gloriously over-the-top descriptions of violence and gore. In this case, quote, the shrapnel doing a mixmaster number on the gray matter, rendering it the consistency of oatmeal. The bullet pieces did not exit, but rather ricocheted around inside the skull, turning the brain into total slag. And then, you know, we've got the forehead pumping blood out like a fire hose. You know, just descriptions that would make Paul Verhoeven proud. Hell, Lloyd Kaufman too, probably. So eventually they make it out of there and are heading toward Colorado, heading west. As, you know, these hordes of mutants run out of the genetic testing facility, you know, megaphoning them to surrender. Of course, Jack Bender has no intention of surrendering. He is on a mission, a twofold mission, actually. First, to make it to Colorado and save his friend and the human rebel leader, Max Turkel, from the cybernetic Emperor Charlemagne, and also to avenge the death of his sweet girlfriend Jenny, who tragically died at the end of Book 1 at the hands of the brutal brain general Torx. So he is resolved to do these things, and so they're headed to Colorado. Meanwhile, our hero, Max Turkel, is, keeping his cool in this, mountain compound, or the Mutant Sheraton, as the rebels call it. And, in the beginning, he is taken into this large underground chamber known as the Deep Zone Ganglia, and is amazed when he's finally, for the first time, confronted with the cyborg Emperor Charlemagne. Because, this villain, this Emperor Charlemagne, is a villain straight out of an 80s Saturday morning cartoon. He has insane rolls of fat and bulging with brain stuff, quote unquote brain stuff, this gray matter bulging out of his head and neck and through the myriad rolls of fat in his body. One side of his body has all of these cables and wires kind of snaking away into these outlets in the wall, because he is in fact the human interface between the mutant government and their computer network, which is known as the Deep Zone, what is it? The Deep Zone Ganglia or something like that. The Ganglia Network, which is pretty cool. This is pre-internet, by the way, folks. So the Emperor tells Max Turkel that he plans to torture him and get all of the information of the rebels out of him before, of course, killing him. He also says he's planning on recording Turkel's screams for playback in the future, just for fun. And Turkel kind of quips that that doesn't sound like his idea of, easy listening. And things are not looking pretty good for Max Turkel. And after a botched escape attempt, he finds himself later in some room suspended from the ceiling by wires, and he has wires connecting to his head and various parts of his body. And then the voice of the Emperor comes transmitted from the walls and tells him that these wires that are connected to him are going to analyze and probe him, quite literally, for any information he has, and also that they are attached to the pain centers of his body and will be operated by mutant bioengineers who are specialists in pain. So things are not looking very good at the moment for the human leader, Max Turkel. So meanwhile, his buddy, Jack Bender, and Phil Potts, these two former farmhands, they finally made it away. They're flying in the plane toward Colorado, but they need to get some fuel. So they land in this field, this kind of farm, and they go to this farmhouse in search of fuel, and they come across a family of halfsies. Now, halfsies are half mutants, half humans. And they stay the night there, and one of the members of this family is a beautiful half-sea teenager named Penelope, who goes and tries to seduce Jack Bender in the middle of the night, gets rejected by him because, of course, his girlfriend Jenny had literally just died. And then she goes and tries her hand at Jack's buddy, Phil Potts. And with Phil, it does work. She does seduce him and ends up taking his virginity and forcing him to repeatedly have sex with her because, as it turns out, these halfsies are always on the lookout for human sperm, which they use for their own reproduction and also to sell on the black market because human sperm is what is necessary for recreation still for these mutants. So she had apparently injected some poison into Phil Potts when she kissed him, which enabled him to repeatedly ejaculate into her. And she was just forcing him to kind of do this over and over again, literally draining him. And if it hadn't been for his buddy Jack Bender to come right in the nick of time, he would have died. He would have literally cummed to death, because she was storing all this stuff in some little pouch she had connected to her vag. But they get out of there, they make their escape. Just one of the many ridiculous episodic adventures that happens in this book. So they make their way. They eventually, Phil and Jack team up with a band of Native Americans who tell them that they will help them find this mountain compound in Colorado. Native American team, including a pretty young girl named Jill Morningstar, who is a potential future love interest for Jack Bender. So let's see. I don't know. I took some notes here. First of all, one thing that has to be said about this book, as I've mentioned before, incredibly, just wonderfully vivid writing, surprisingly. These kind of books usually are pretty lazily written, but I really enjoyed, some of the ways that Mark Grant or David Bischoff, in fact, describe things. For example, in the beginning, when Max Turkel is face to face with the mutant, cybernetic mutant emperor Charlemagne, the emperor spits on Max's face. He hawks a big loogie and spits on him. And the way that the author described it, he says, quote, "It was like getting slapped with mucus pie. The malodorous stuff, chock full of noisome green and brown chunks of effluvia, slimed down Turkel's face, rivered down his shirted chest and legs, then hung like a mutated Christmas tree ornament to the ends of his shoes." Just really interestingly, written visuals there, right? Also, the way that this author describes the violence, almost Sean Hudson-esque painterly descriptions of violence. For instance, there's a scene where the brain general Torx, who is kind of like the Darth Vader of this story, the one who is sent out, to get Max Turkel and who brings him back to the Emperor. There's a scene in which he is engaging in one of his favorite sports, which is shooting down human rebels who are captives through a trapdoor. He presses a button and then they get flung out of their cells through this trapdoor into a shooting gallery, and he shoots them down with his high-tech mutant weapons. And the way that this is described, the way that these human rebels are cut down. Did I write that one down? Cutting them in two, their faces and chests turned to hamburger, being reduced to a smear of blood and clothing on the wall. Some of the verbs that this guy uses, there was a shootout scene between Jack, Phil, and the Native Americans and some outlaw bikers. And the way that he describes shotgun blasts, blood chunked out of the leather jackets, just like that verb, chunked. Very, very vivid. You can tell that, this was very lovingly done. We also get some exposition in this book. We learn that these brain generals that are, high-ranking members of the mutant military, they actually want a coup. They want to assassinate Emperor Charlemagne and have a coup because he is a cyborg, and they believe he is not meant to rule their mutant kind. And they actually, one of the brain generals actually proposes something to Max Turkel, asking if he will help them take down this Emperor Charlemagne. So, this book was not quite as engaging as the first one, I have to admit. Sometimes, it took me a while to pick it up, but definitely has high entertainment value with the aforesaid levels of violence. It's also, quite funny at times. There's one point where Max Turkel is saved at the last minute from execution from the Emperor because it turns out that he actually owes the mutant IRS back taxes because he has a lifetime of unpaid income tax, and they want him to, give him or tell him where his stashed money is before they execute him. So little final reprieve, funny things like that. Of course, also, as in the first one, a lot of graphic, hard NC-17 levels of sex in this book. Sometimes unnecessarily so, like, for example, the scene with Phil Potts and the half-sea who is draining him for his semen. But, all in all, these books are just ludicrous, and I cannot believe that they were published by, sort of a mainstream publisher. Really interesting artifacts, and I will certainly continue to read these. There are 5 of these in total. As you can see, though, I don't read these like back to back. It was months since I had read the first book, so who knows how long it'll take me to complete this series, but I will eventually complete it and, do reviews of all these. If you are the type of person who likes violent pulp trash and likes just kind of over-the-top craziness, literally, I keep saying, the equivalent of just like a gory adult Saturday morning cartoon, definitely look into this series. It's long out of print, but, these books are out there on the secondhand market. They're quite fun. So Mutants Amok, Book 2, Mutant Hell, not as good as the first one, but definitely, keeping my interest for the series and wanting to continue to see what happens with Max and Phil and, this Emperor and all that stuff. So, good, fun, trashy pulp reads there. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the review. Halloween is coming. We got October approaching. I have some fun books planned to read and review and some other fun videos. So definitely keep a lookout for those. If you haven't yet, perfect opportunity to subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. I will see you soon. Peace out.